Do you see the next generation of Christians as our replacements or reinforcements? Let's talk about that on today's 10-minute talk. Hey, good morning, everybody, and welcome to today's 10-minute talk. And today we are talking about preference. And preference is an interesting thing in the Christian world. There is a lot of it. And I think in any part of the world, in anybody's life, there is a lot of preference. Things people like. And I'm not talking about sin and not sin. I'm talking about things that aren't sinful, that some people prefer and some people don't. And it creates this tension among us. And part of that tension, friends, is with the younger generation. And we have a tough time understanding a lot of times how the younger generation worships, how they love Jesus, what it looks like to them compared to what it looks like to older generations. And I'm kind of in a sandwich here. I'm kind of in the middle. And so I have my own preferences as well and my own opinions. And I think that's okay. I think it's okay for everybody to have their preferences. But as new people enter the church, new believers, young believers, we have to think about when they come in, what is our attitude towards those people truly in reference to our preferences? Because what happens is our preferences start to interfere with our opportunities to disciple people. And friends, that is when it starts to become sinful. When we put ourselves and our preferences before the spiritual growth of another group or another person. That is dangerous. I want to read you this quote before we dig into scripture, and I'm going to put the quote on the screen. This quote says this: "The Great Commission tells us to make disciples. That means to make disciples from today's world. So, to speak to people and invite people to Christ is to be able to speak their language, empathize with them, and understand their culture. Whether you like modern culture or not, to be a student of it is to be a leader in discipleship. That is being in the world, not of it. You can't help a dog by incessantly meowing at it." So here's what that means, friends. It means that we need to understand and do our best to understand younger culture. That means we need to have conversations with people. That means we need to be reading up on it. No, it doesn't mean we agree with it, we like it, we think it's the best thing in the world, although there may be parts of it that we think are great. But what it means is that we understand their purpose, their why, where they're coming from. And then, and only then, will we be able to build bridges, develop relationships, and disciple these people because we speak their language or at least understand what they're saying. Because, friends, what happens is we get stuck in our own generation, in a rut, in our culture, and we can't move out of it. This is what we like. This is how it should be. And it cannot change. Now what happens is these younger people enter our space. Let's think of our sanctuaries. And they look around and they see that everything has nothing to do with how they see Jesus, how they experience Jesus. And we lose the younger generation. And let me remind you that without that younger generation, the church ceases to exist. They are the future. And we lose them because of silly things that we see as tradition that have nothing to do with the Bible. I'm not talking about communion. I'm not talking about baptism. I'm not talking about how our posture and attitude are during worship. I'm talking about silly physical things. I'm talking about traditions that maybe aren't even biblical, that we've just been doing for a long time, and so it seems so normal to us. I'll give you a quick example. Dressing in a suit and tie. Big deal to a lot of older generations. Okay, I only wear a suit and tie at funerals and weddings. Recently, I was asked why I don't wear a suit and tie more. To me, a suit and tie does not symbolize that I am closer to Christ. And so out of respect, I will wear one at a funeral or a wedding because it's not about me. It's about the preferences, their preferences of the family of who passed. And if they asked me not to wear a suit, I wouldn't. And or the bride and groom in the wedding would like me to be in a suit. And then it's not about my preference, friends. Okay, but the way I experience Christ is Christ does not care what clothes that I wear. And I understand that. Traditionally, you dress up for church. I don't necessarily think that has to be that way. And there might be some of you cringing in your seats right now. But if your preference is to dress up for church, then dress up for church. I don't have a problem with that at all. But what happens is some of these younger generations may come to your churches and they may walk in the door and see everybody in a suit and tie. And if you don't go and engage them in conversation so they understand that you're okay with them not wearing a suit and tie, it's just what you do, then we're going to have a problem discipling those people. Or maybe there's something in your sanctuary that you think is amazing and you really like it. Mine is communion tables. Listen, I have this story. Our communion table in Iowa got soaked with water. There was a leak in the roof, soaked with water. Wood was bubbled up. Okay? If you know anything about wood, once it bubbles up, it's pretty much done. So we moved it out from where it was. We cleaned up the leak. We came in the next day, and the wood looked like nothing had ever happened to it. And that moved my heart because that defies everything I've known about when wood gets really soaking wet. It was a miracle. And to me, that communion table has a special place. But if a younger group of people come in and they're like, that communion table is out of place, it looks weird, it's distracting to me, it's all hunky, and it makes it harder for me to worship or harder for me, I just don't understand it. Maybe, just maybe I need to move that communion table because it's not a sin to not have a communion table on the stage. You can do communion without a table. It's not a sin to move it off. It's not a sin to only bring it out when you're doing communion and have it somewhere else all the other times. It's not a sin to have it up there either. It's a preference. And so we have to really think about those things and think about the younger generation and how we're discipling them. Is our preference taking a place over the discipleship of the younger generation? I want to read this scripture to you real quick in Romans 14, 1-9. It's a lot of scriptures, so here we go. Except the one whose faith is weak, without quarreling over disputable matters. One person's faith allows them to eat anything, but another, whose faith is weak, eats only vegetables. The one who eats everything must not treat with contempt the one who does not. And the one who does not eat everything must not judge the one who does, for God has accepted them. Who are you to judge someone else's servant? To their own master, servants stand or fall, and they will stand, for the Lord is able to make them stand. One person considers one day more sacred than another, and another considers every day alike. Each of them should be fully convinced in their own mind. Stop. Let's stop there. Now, I understand what that sounds like is everybody should be able to honor their preference, and that's okay. That is correct, biblically correct. But as more mature and experienced believers, as older generation, wiser generation, I believe it is our job to humble ourselves and say, it is my turn to allow these younger people to start to step up and lead, to allow them to show how their preference connects to the Spirit. Maybe we will learn something new. If you were in the middle of the war, which we are, and your group was getting smaller and smaller and tired, and you had these old weapons, let's say you were using swords, and the enemy started using new weapons, guns, missiles. Okay, they got the whole 9 yards. And friends, I promise you, the enemy is using new weapons. And then your captain sends in reinforcements with these new weapons, these new flashy weapons that you don't quite understand why they even matter, and says, I have reinforcements for you. And you say, no, I'm not moving from the front line. I am not going to be a substitute. I am not being replaced. Oh, friend, the young people are not replacements. They're here to help. They're reinforcements. They're here to help. They're here to take the next step for the church, and we're blocking that. I had a member one time, as I was a pastor, complain to me about people having holes in their jeans on the worship stage. How dare they? He said. And I thought to myself, what if the holes in their jeans are because they're on their knees praying so often that their jeans are worn down? Friends, if we're more worried about the holiness of somebody's jeans rather than the holiness of their character, then maybe we need to take a look in the mirror and remove that plank from our own eye. Thank you for joining me today. Thank you for joining us. I love you guys. Hope you subscribe to the channels below. Have a great week.